Hello, welcome to episode 189 of the CraftHouseMagic podcast. My name's Ellie and I'm coming to you from Norwich in Norfolk in the UK, and today is the 4th of November. So welcome everybody. I hope you've all had a lovely crafty week since the last time I've spoken to you, and I'm here to share all the things that I've been making in the last 7 days. So today I have some knitting, and there is a little bit of crochet in there as well. So it's a sort of knitting and crochet section this time. And I will be showing some patterns that I'm going to release on the 1st of December that were designed to go with this year's Advent and also the Starlight Wishes sock set as well. So I shall show you those in a little bit. I have some cross stitch, I have a gadget, I have a blast from the past, a couple of questions from the Ask Me Anything thread in the Ravelry group or from the emails. I have a couple of confessions. I've got an excuse though, I'll explain later. And some information on my shop update at the end of the podcast. Now I have some new yarn to show you, so make sure you stick around for the end as well. So we have the Craft 20 a Day Makalong going on in the Ravelry group at the moment, but also on Instagram. That's basically chipping away a little bit each day at those bigger projects, and it can be any craft. So do check out the details in the description bar down below. So let's get on with the knitting stroke crochet section, shall we? So I have finished my garland or bunting that contained all my little autumnal little items that I'd made. I showed you last week on the podcast. So I'm going to pop on the screen now as I'm talking the finished item on the fireplace so that you can see what it looks like properly. And I will talk about the patterns that I've used. So in the bunting I made a couple of acorns, and that acorn pattern is by Hamlin, and I used 2.75mm needles with 4-ply yarn rather than the called for Aran weight yarn and bigger needles, just because I wanted a smaller acorn so that I could put it on the bunting. So the acorn is knitted. I've also made a few fall leaves, which are a crochet pattern by Michelle at the Painted Hinge, and those are made with crochet, like I said, with an autumn mini set from my shop on BFL, and there are a couple of those sets in the shop if you're looking to get some. I've also made a couple of the pumpkins, and these are the spice and clove knit and crochet pumpkins, and I've used the knitted version for these just because I liked how they looked better. The first version I did is a smaller pumpkin, and I actually used 2.5mm needles with 4-ply yarn, and then the newer one I did, it's 2.75mm needles with 4-ply yarn, so it made it a little bit bigger. So the actual pattern says 2.75mm needles, so, but it is nicer to have a sort of variation in size. So to join them together I used a crocheted chain. So I did use a very similar method to how Sandra from Cherry Heart joined her heart bunting together. So I basically chained enough so that I'd have enough to hang the bunting over the fireplace, and then I joined it onto the first of the little decorations. I did 30 chains between each of the decorations and then joined the next one, and when I joined all of them on, I then did the same length the other side as I did to begin with, to make the crocheted chains long enough to hang up on the fireplace. Then I went back along that chain with a double crochet all the way back to the other end, and then I did a second row of double crochet, and that's a UK double crochet all the way along that chain just to make it a little bit more sturdy. And then at either end I used the ends to sew in to make a loop at either end so that I could hook it onto a picture frame or something if I decided to display it like that. But you don't have to do that, of course. But this is a very similar technique as the one that Sandra used in her heart bunting, which I will leave a link to in the description bar down below. So that is my autumnal finished project, and I'm really pleased I actually finished it this year, because I did make the leaves last year and never got around to finishing it. But I would like to make some more of those pumpkins to go around the fireplace to give it a bit more of an autumnal decoration feel. So our next thing I've got to show you is my patterns. So if you don't want to see what the patterns will look like, just skip along to the next section, which is the cross stitch section. But I will be showing the socks and the blanket pattern that I'll be releasing on the 1st of December. if you have already purchased one of the Starlight Wishes advents or sock sets, you will have had the pattern via email by now. I sent them out on Monday. So let's show you the sock pattern. So I have 4 versions of this sock pattern. I'm going to show you the yarn that I designed to go with the kit after I've showed you the pattern, in case you want to keep the yarn as a surprise. I will tell you to look away from the screen just when I show that. But it is a top-down sock pattern, and these are the versions that I've completed. So I've got some 4-ply versions, but also DK. So the instructions in the pattern are for not only the 4-ply version but the DK. You can probably see it better on camera with the paler cream colourway, so that you can see the details on the sock. So we have some bobbles at the top, and these are to represent having little snowball fights as in a starry wintry evening. So we've got the shooting stars across the top, and then these are the stars in the sky. And the rest of the sock is quite plain, because I feel that when you're getting up to Christmas, you don't want to have too much of a detailed pattern to distract you from all the festivities. So these are the 4-ply versions, and like I said, I've done a couple of those, and I have got the yarn that it was designed to go in the colourway. In a minute I shall show you, but I have got it in DK as well, so you can see the bobbles and the shooting stars here. And again, this is a DK weight yarn, so you've got the instructions for both 4-ply and DK, and that is the DK version. So I've got my 2 DK socks, and this is the grey version in the 4-ply. I'm not sure whether you'll be able to see the detail in this one as much on the camera because it's quite a dark grey. That's in grey. I have a full sock in the cream, but I've not quite finished the second sock yet, but I am working on it. So this yarn, as well as the grey one, this one here, is a yarn that I had in my stash for ages, and I'm not even sure where I got it from. I'm not very impressed with how the yarn looks when you just knit it up. It isn't sort of as neat, but once it's blocked, it's actually come out quite nicely. And the DK yarn is my own hand-dyed yarn in a teal colourway. That's actually the same colour as one of the colours in the Fade to Grey mini set, but I'm hoping to release this as a separate colour when I get back to doing lots of dyeing in the new year in January. So I'm now going to show you the colourway that is coming with that's come with the kits for the Starlight Wishes sock set. So if you don't want to see that, look away now. But this is the colourway. So this is the set, and I think that that illustrates quite a nice starry sky with the clouds, and there are little pops of moonlight in there as well in the yarn, and you can see that the pattern is the same. You've got your bobbles. These bobbles I've got a tutorial for on my YouTube channel, and last week I put a tutorial for the little Aster stitch, which is the star at the top of the shooting star. So you do have some videos there to show you the more difficult parts of the sock, but the rest of it is pretty easy to follow. And I have a full pair knitted in the colourway that I designed for this year's Starlight Wishes sock pattern. So now I've taken them off the screen. You can look back if you did want to keep it a secret. So those are my 4 pairs of socks that I've knitted for the new sock pattern, and that will be available on the 1st of December to everybody who didn't order one of those pre-order kits. I now have my blanket pattern to show you. So this is rather a small sample at the moment, but Adam's mum is working on a much bigger sample for me, which is in sort of paler colours, and this one I've tried to choose more dual tones. So this is my Triangulum blanket pattern, and this is basically inspired by the Triangulum star constellation, which is, I had to have that name because it was related to the sort of Starlight Wishes theme of this year's advent. And if I get a bit closer, you'll be able to see the texture of these triangles. So I thought that I hadn't really seen any blanket patterns out there that were sort of triangular in shape and easy to join. So I've designed the patterns so you can either add them in rows, or you can work in a hexagon and do a strip all the way around so that your final version is actually a hexagonal shaped blanket. But of course, if you do them in straight, you'll end up with like a zigzag edge at either side and then a straight line at the top. But there are full instructions in the pattern of how to do that and what order to add your triangles in when you're constructing it. But I thought it'd be a nice change to use some of my dual tone yarns instead of sticking to all the light ones that I normally use. But that is the pattern. I'm hoping to get a sort of a small lap blanket size done by the time we get to the 1st of December, when the pattern is released properly on Ravelry and on my website so that you can purchase it. So that's out the 1st of December as well. So that is all my knitting I've got to show you today. I have done a little bit of work on clue 4 of my Stephen West mystery knit along, but I haven't done enough to really show you, so I'm going to save that till next week and hopefully get a big chunk done. And it is so much fun to knit though. I'm really excited to get back to knitting that. But next I have some cross stitch to show you. I have been working on my little school sampler, and this is a pattern by the Cross Stitch Guild. And this was a pattern I picked up the Festival of Quilts a couple of years ago, and I picked this up in a kit with the linen and the threads and everything all together. So I've done the alphabet at the top of the page, and I love all these sort of muted tones of colour. That'll be really nice to go in the house, I think. The back I don't feel as if it's as neat as it should be really, just because some of the stitches on the trees were satin stitch and also they were French knots as well, so I've just threaded the yarn across the back of the work rather than starting and stopping. But there we go. That's my cross stitch. I'm hoping to get this finished in the next few weeks. We shall see. So the next section I've got to show you is Gadget. So normally when I'm doing cables, if it's just one stitch over one stitch, I'll do cabling without a cable needle. But if you've got a few stitches, I always find a cable needle is really useful. So if you like cabling, I thought I'd show you some of my favourite cabling needles. So I have a set from Higher that has got bubbles and sparkly bits in, which I think is really nice. And I like them because they've got a straight bit at the top, but they're then bent to stop your stitches from falling off, so they're useful. And they come in a set with 3 sizes, so I really like those ones. But I also like these bent ones that Clover do, and they also come in a set of 3 sizes as well. But I'll just show you one so that you can see what they look like. So you can actually have your cable stitches at the top of there, or you can use it so you're using this straight bit here, which I find really useful as well. So I use these interchangeably really, whichever ones I fancy. So that's the Gadget for this week. So I have my blast from the past section now, and as I've talked about the patterns that I had for this year's advent, I thought I'd show you last year's patterns. So I have 3 pairs of the socks that I released last year. So these are the Mistletoe Kisses socks. It might be easier if I just show you one pair first, instead of trying to hold the whole set up. So this is the Mistletoe Kisses yarn that I designed it in. Bear in mind, these 3 pairs I've worn them, so they're not the neatest. But they're still holding up quite well. And they've got a little set of bobbles there that are to represent the mistletoe, and then we have a lacy pattern underneath. I also have a little detail of a little X there for a kiss, a little bit of cable. And this yarn, like I said, was the Mistletoe Kisses version. I have that pair. And I have it in 2 other colourways that I've got. That is Santa Baby, which is a sort of rich pinky red and turquoise. They're the same pattern. And I also have it in All I Want for Christmas Is You. You can probably see the little kiss a little bit better on the green yarn. So that is last year's sock pattern, but I have the Advent pattern from last year. So this was designed to work with like a set of 24 10-gram Advent minis or 12 20-gram Advent minis, so depending on what you've got. Or to be honest, you can make it as long as you like. You don't have to use the set number of minis that it's designed for. You can just knit it until you've got the length that you want. So this is a wrap pattern, so it is a long wrap that goes around the body, and it's got some very cute tassels, which I love, at the end. So one end is that shape, and then the other end is that shape, and you have some sections of lace in between. This is knitted with some purples and pink yarns out of my stash, and I suppose you'd wear it either like as a wrap, or you could wear it as a scarf actually if you didn't want to wear it as a proper wrap all the time. But I just love how the little tassels work on the ends of the wrap. So I also have a turquoise one as well, and that was with all the turquoise yarns out of my stash. But this pattern is a good way of using up those advent minis. For these ones I've tried to sort of fade one colour to another so that they work really well together next to each other. So you could choose which mini you're then going to use next. You don't have to do the lacy bits because obviously at Christmas it's quite busy. You don't want to have to be doing lots of detailed lace. You can always omit those sections. But that is last year's Cupid's Arrow wrap that went with the Advents. I'm going to take this off because I'm a bit warm in this room. Got the heating on, full blast already. So I have a couple of questions from the Ask Me Anything thread in the Ravelry group. And the first one's from Tina, and Tina has asked for a recommendation for a lace shawl that is not too difficult but a bit more advanced than just rows of eyelets, so it's not too complicated. I have picked a couple of shawls out of my stash that I've knitted that I think might be good. This one is quite big, however. But I do think it's a Helen Stewart pattern, and I do feel that the way she lays out her patterns are very good, but there is quite a bit of interesting lace there. So this is the Snow Melt shawl by Helen Stewart, and there are some nice different lace patterns there. But it's a half sort of circle shawl, so it is quite big, and this one requires 300 grams skeins of yarn, but I did have at least sort of 20-30 grams left from each skein when this was made. But isn't it gorgeous? I love that. So that's one option that you could go for. I can't quite remember the yarns that I used to make up the shawl, but I will leave a link to my Ravelry page where the details are. I have a slightly more scary looking one, but it really isn't that difficult. So this one is actually knitted with lace yarn, but you don't have to knit them with lace. You could go for a thicker yarn. And I thought that these columns of lace sections, they're not actually very difficult to follow, and I thought that might be an option that you could use. So when you're knitting with lace yarn, it does look a bit scarier because obviously it's finer yarn, but you can absolutely knit it with a 4-ply with a slightly bigger needle so that you can see the stitches better. But I don't think that it's any more difficult to knit with lace. But this is a Boo Knits pattern, and it's called Intrepid Spirit, and I think because they're columns of lace, they're quite easy to do. And I've pulled the when I've blocked it, I've pulled these ends out to look like that, so you don't have to have them so obviously sticking out. And this pattern has actually got beads with it as well. Well, I think the beads really add to it, because if you look at where the beads are, you can see that it sort of weighs down the fabric of the shawl as well. And adding beads to shawls, it really isn't as difficult as it sounds. But of course you don't have to add the beads, but I thought because of the columns of lace, that would be a slightly easier one to follow, following on from just eyelet rows. But there we go. So I think somebody was asking me on the podcast comments last week about some tips on how to divide your lace knitting so you don't get confused over the row. I tend to try and add stitch markers every so many stitches. Normally the pattern will suggest you where to place the stitch markers so that you don't get confused, because if there is a yarn over that's near a stitch marker, sometimes it can move or get you confused. So it's a good idea to do the stitch marker placement where the pattern says. So anyway, I'm diverting from the question. So I hope those two patterns are useful to you, Tina. Hopefully they're not too complicated. I think don't be put off by the lace yarn though. It does look scarier, but it really isn't. It's just a little bit harder to see because it's a little bit finer. So my next question is from Jan. She was talking about making a sock tube. So she says she's making a sock tube starting with 2x2 rib. Does it matter if you put a second toe at the end of the sock tube, or just do another rib like I have in my splitting a sock tube into 2 pairs of socks? Does it make a difference? So the reason why I did a sort of sock tube with cuffs at both ends is that a cuff is a very easy thing to knit when you're sort of out and about and you're busy and you're being distracted. So you can absolutely put a toe on the very end of that sock tube. So in the tutorial, I actually just knit the whole of the skein of yarn. So I'm using up every little centimetre just to make sure that I make my socks as sort of long as possible and don't waste any yarn. But you absolutely don't have to do it like that. So if you did knit an entire tube with 1 foot at one end and the cuff at the other, you'd end up with 1 cuff in the same yarn as the whole tube and 1 toe as the same yarn as the whole tube, and then have a contrast for the rest of the cuffs and heels, if that makes sense. That's if you didn't have any left. It would make it more difficult to match the stripes in the cuff if you'd done a toe and a cuff and just left some yarn over to make the cuffs and toes in later, if that makes sense. So if you want the whole sock to be in the same yarn, I would suggest doing 2 separate tubes, knit them from the cuff down to the toe, add the toes in, and then just have an afterthought heel for the rest of the sock. But that definitely wouldn't take 100 grams of yarn. You just need to calculate the length of how you want your foot to be and your leg, and then you can cut in the heel afterwards. So I hope that makes sense. I have my confession section now. No, I haven't been naughty. Okay, I was on the Rainbow Fabrics website again, just having a little look. And I saw this jersey fabric. Okay, I'm going to have to show you right now. So this is the fabric that I saw and I was just in love with. So this is a viscose jersey, and I just thought, oh, wouldn't that be lovely as a gorgeous wrap dress? And I thought, well, I can't buy any more fabric, it's just ridiculous. I've been buying fabric a lot lately again, and I was talking to my mum on FaceTime, as you do. She says, I don't know what to get you for Christmas. I said, Mum, you can get me this fabric. So she has bought me this fabric, and I have washed it, and I'm going to give it to Adam to pack up for me for Christmas. But I thought I'll show it to you on the podcast, because by the time it gets to Christmas they won't have any of these on the website. I did think the last time I looked a few days ago they did have some of this left on the website. So this is a viscose jersey with a nice bit of drape that would be ideal for a wrap dress. Just a nice cosy dress to wear sort of in the day. And then I thought, well, I can't just have that, can I? So Mum said, she gave me a sort of budget, and I picked some more things. So I saw this as well. This is a viscose. This is a viscose crepe in like a muted green colour with flowers, and I thought that that would make a really nice blouse or shirt. So a couple of metres of that. And then I thought, well, I saw these satins and I thought, well, I need those. Not that I'm going to be going anywhere, but I've got a pink, a cerise pink and a black satin as well to make some fancier dresses out of. This satin actually is quite a lot drapier than this one. This is a little bit thicker, but obviously I can pick the pattern according to the drape of it and adapt it accordingly. I did get 3 meters of each of these because I know that for the Upton dress by Cashmerette I can get a dress out of 3 meters, so we shall see. I might make an Upton, I might make something else. So those are my presents from Mum for Christmas. I've got to put them away now, otherwise I get told off. So I now have my shop update section, and so everybody who purchased the Starlight Wishes advents or sock sets will have already received the patterns that came with those sets, because I sent them out on Monday. If you haven't received yours, drop me an email and I will sort it out for you. And the patterns for everybody else will be available on the 1st of December. So I am excited to announce that I've got some new opal yarns in the shop. So one of my suppliers that does my gadgets also does opal yarn, and if you've been watching the podcast for any length of time, you'll know that opal is my favourite of all the commercial yarns for sock knitting. So I thought I would stock a few and see how they go. Plus I want to knit some myself. So I have some 4-ply versions and also some DK as well. These are all 4-ply. These are from the Memories set of yarns, and these 3 were my favourites, so I've picked all the ones that I really loved, and I will go through what they're called because they've got fancy names. So the first of them is Adventure Vacation with Uncle Nils, and this is a gorgeous corally pink, turquoise and grey in there. I just love those colours, absolutely love it. So I'm going to have to cast some of this on. So there's a picture there of what the sock stripes up like if it's knitted. And aren't those colours gorgeous? So that's the first one. So that again is Adventure Vacation with Uncle Nils. The second colour is called Grandma Telling Us Stories. Aren't these cute names? And look at those purples and pinks. And a bit of turquoise as well, because you always have to have turquoise. And the cutest labels on these. So that's the second one. So these are all 4-ply. The last one of the 4-plies is Playmate and Loyal Friend. And that is all the sort of blues and turquoises. Really pretty. So these are really needing to be cast on as well. I want to nick a ball of all of these. But I'll list them by the names on my website as well as the numbers. So these are all from the new Memories collection from Opal. But I did order a couple of DK as well because I thought they'd be nice for either DK socks, or you can make hats or mittens with these. They can still be, they still stripe up nicely as well. So these ones are the Ice Palace set of yarns, and they're both DK. They're all actually a mixture of wool and polyamide, so they're good for socks. So that polyamide gives you the extra bit of strength. But I just thought these names were really nice as well. First of all, this one's called a Shiny Ballroom. How cool is that? And it's got a multitude of gorgeous bright colours. I can see some really lovely bright socks there, and that's what it looks like when it's knitted up. But I just love how the turquoise, pinks and purples work together, and little pops of all the other colours as well. So that's the first of the DK ones, and I have the second one, which is here, and this is called Clinking Fountains, and I just love how icy this looks. It's blues with a little hint of turquoise in there as well. And that is that's what it looks like when it's knitted up. But really love these colours. I've basically picked all my favourite yarns so that I can steal them all. So those are the yarns that are going in the shop. Just remember that these 2 are DK and these 3 are 4-ply. So the 4-ply versions are 425 metres per 100 grams. And the DK version, there's actually 150 grams in these balls, so that there is obviously you're going to need a little bit more for a pair of socks in DK. So I know for a size 6 UK I can get a pair of socks out of 150 grams of DK yarn, but if you've got rather large feet you might need 2 balls. But there are 320 meters in 150 grams of the DK ones, but I will leave details in the descriptions of all the listings so you can double check meterage and the composition of the yarn as well. So those are going in the shop. But I've also seen some more of the chart keepers. Now I've sold these in my shop for some time now. These are the Knit Pro chart keepers, which have press stud at the front, and this is actually my version that I've been using. So you can actually put on the desk next to you your chart with this magnet that goes over the top, and you can mark where you are on the chart, which I think is brilliant. There is this size and a larger size. This size fits half an A4 sheet, and the larger size fits a full A4 sheet. And there's these other little magnets as well that you can put onto your work. There is a pen in this side, and there's a zip pouch. So this one I've had in my shop a while, and this is my personal copy. They have done previously different patterns in these, but I only really liked the black version. The other ones had I didn't really like the print on the other version, so I only actually ordered in the black ones. It's got like a swirly pattern. But now I've seen another pattern that they've just brought out, which is rather lovely. So these are actually one of the new prints. I didn't get the other one because I wasn't so keen on it, but this blue is just beautiful. It's like a watercolour print, but this is more like a canvas rather than, this one is more like you could wipe it over. It's like a more shiny fabric on that one, but this is more like a canvas feel. And that, again, you've got this size for half of A4 sheet and this size for a full A4 sheet. Inside these are brand new, so they're very exciting. So you've got a massive area to put your pattern there, so if you wanted to put your A4 sheet, you could have that on the desk next to you. I think these larger ones are good for at home, and the smaller ones are good for sort of travelling and sticking them in your project bag. But they're the same. They've got a pen holder and a little zip pocket there, so you can store all your bits and bobs, and your pattern can be held with magnets on that side. So that's that big one, and I'll quickly show you the smaller one. So that is the smaller one. This is the size that I tend to prefer, just because I can have it in a project bag then that's quite manoeuvrable. You can take it places with you a bit better. Depends on how big your knitting bag is though, or your crochet bag or whatever. So again, it's got those magnets on the one side. So that's going in the shop this Friday. So all these things will be in the shop on Friday at 7 PM GMT. And I'm really excited to have these new yarns. I think that's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I shall see you in the next episode. Bye!